Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. My name is Nashla Dewari with FloridaShines, and I will be facilitating today's session. Now, before we begin, I want to go over a few items with you. If you have questions, please put them in the question box, and we will address them during the live Q&A at the end. Closed captioning is provided for this session, and you can click on the link in the chat box. This session will be recorded, and the recording, along with all the materials shared today, will be posted on our website at FloridaShines.org. And finally, we are live on Twitter, so feel free to share your comments and connect with us at FLShines, and you can use the hashtag CollegeSuccess throughout the event. Now, the summer is coming up, and it's a great time to visit college and university campuses. So today's session is all about preparing you to narrow down your list of top choices. Florida has 40 colleges and universities that offer a large range of degrees and experiences, so it's really important for you to find the school that's right for your budget, for your major, and most importantly for you. Now, to tell us more about selecting the right college or university and being prepared, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Julie Richardson. Julie has been an associate director at Florida State University for 4 years and has worked in college admissions for 11 years overall. Working in a variety of different types of colleges and universities has really given her an insight to review college applications in many ways, and really her true passion is helping guide prospective high school students, parents, and guidance counselors through the college admissions process. Julie, we are honored to have you with us today. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be able to join you all today and kind of share my knowledge of admissions as well as hopefully answer some questions that you all have. So I'll go ahead and get started. The first thing that I wanted to talk about, as Nashla said, there are so many different colleges and universities out there. It can sometimes be a little daunting to figure out where do you start. And I think the most important thing to start with is really to ask yourself, what is most important to you in your college experience? So that could be, what is it that you want to study? How far away from home do you feel comfortable being? What size of an institution do you want to go to? There are a lot of different sizes of colleges. Maybe you're looking for a large school experience or a small school experience. What is the cost of attendance for that institution, if that's an issue for your family as far as budgeting? And also, too, going to college is not just about earning a degree. It's also about the experiences that you have. So it's also important to know, what type of extracurricular activities do you enjoy participating in, or would you like to be involved in? And so all of those factors are really important when you start your college search, so that way you can try to narrow down what the right institution is for you, who has some of the things you're looking for, even though you may say, oh, I like X institution, but if they don't have your major or if it's not a good fit for you, overall it may not be the best institution for you to attend or even apply for. So it's important to go ahead and make those determinations and even make a list. What are your top 10 things that are most important to you in your college experience? Because you're going to spend 4 years at this institution, and that's a lot of time. And we want to make sure that it's a right fit for you. The university wants to make sure it's also on their end a right fit as well. And so those are some important things when you're starting your college search. After you've kind of narrowed down some of those items, it's also important to explore majors. And so I know in high school, sometimes students are kind of on a narrow pathway of the curriculum that's actually available to them. And when you go to college, there's so many different types of degrees and different job opportunities that are out there that it can be very daunting to try to figure out, okay, I want to do X, how do I get there? And so I think it's important to do research about majors, figure out what are your long-term goals, what types of work do you enjoy doing, because ultimately, the career path that you choose, we would hope that you would want to enjoy doing that type of work. Also, too, you're going to want to look at the institutions and do they offer your major. and what is also required to study in that program. I kind of just mentioned, you want to be happy with what you're studying and also what your career is. So it's important to know what your strengths are, what type of academic interests you have. I say this, many students I think sometimes say they want to work as a nurse or become a nurse because they really enjoy helping people, and then realize that that major is very science detailed and that it's not actually the right fit for them. And so looking at the curriculum of each of the majors and what types of outcomes would you also have if you studied that specific degree. I think it's also important, too, as you're looking at and narrowing down your college choices who have your major of interest, to actually compare the degrees side by side. I think you'll find from one institution to the other, there's a variety of different coursework that's actually offered for some of those degrees. I think the one that I use the most to reference is engineering. Engineering is a very particular major. It's very focused in certain areas, and you will find from one institution to the next that the type of curriculum that's offered for that major is very different. And so I think if you're looking for specific outcomes, it's important to compare those side by side to see which is going to be the best fit for you and also offer what it is specifically that you're looking for. I know Nashla has some information to share with you, and I know we also have a resource, at least at Florida State. Regardless if you're attending Florida State or not, I always recommend we have an academic program guide that actually outlines all 150 of the different programs that we offer at Florida State. It talks about the descriptions of those majors as well as different employment options that our students have once they graduate. And so even if you don't attend Florida State, like I said, it's a great resource just to kind of see what types of jobs and careers are out there, what types of majors require what types of coursework that you would study over that 4-year period, et cetera. So Nashla, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you to kind of explain some of the tools that you all have available.
Absolutely. Thank you, Julie, because it really is about making that informed decision and making that connection between what you're interested in, what programs are available, and then income and career options as well. So what might be helpful to consider in terms of all the factors that you mentioned, Julie, in selecting the right college or university is starting with one place where you can see all of your options. And so we wanted to share a resource through FloridaShines, which offers one place under school profiles, so FloridaShines.org, and then you can click on Explore Colleges and Universities to get there. Now, the profiles are a great place to start because you can explore what's available in Florida and then narrow down your choices either by location, by degrees offered, campus size, housing feature, sports, and cost, and even walk through that list that Julie just mentioned to make sure that that's a good match. So now once you've selected the school that you'd like to learn more about, then you'll see what you're seeing here, kind of an easy, user-friendly way to learn about the school, and then from there, make that extra connection directly with, for example, the admissions office. So for instance, in this case, with Florida State University, you'd be able to see the most important features of the university, use Julie's guide to learn about their programs and their highlights, and then connect with, in this case, Julie's team for questions about admissions, getting started, and then visiting the campus. So Julie, I'll hand it back to you to talk about that part as well.
Great. Okay, so after you've kind of narrowed down the institutions that you're interested in, I think it's also really important to plan a college visit. And the reason for that is, you can read about information online and it will tell you very bare bones about that specific institution. But again, like I said, this is making a choice of where you're going to spend 4 years, and that's a lot of time and a huge investment to make. So it's important that it feels right. And so I recommend visiting a college campus. This is where you're really going to be able to tour residence halls, interact with current students, possibly eat in the dining hall, ask questions of faculty or current staff. And, those experiences really, factor what schools are your top choice. The one thing I do recommend is even as early as your sophomore or junior year, typically we see in admissions juniors are typically when they're starting to plan their college visits, actually right around now. Many colleges are actually open over the summer. That's a great time to visit. I know in Florida it's very hot, but we also offer visits all year here at Florida State, as many of the other institutions in Florida as well, where you can come take a campus tour. They may offer other sessions. I know at Florida State we offer a financial aid session. We also offer a session about studying abroad. So you have those opportunities to connect with different departments and learn more about what that institution offers. I know sometimes trying to travel, the state of Florida is fairly large, so trying to get from one side to the other can be challenging, and many of us actually have virtual tours, which is something I've highlighted here on our website, to also provide students some information or just different views of different parts of our campus to kind of see what it's like. But I think physically being able to go to a college campus is very important, because within typically about 30 to 40 minutes, I think most families really get a sense of what that atmosphere is like and if it's a good fit for you or not. And I think that's something you're going to hear me say probably more over and over as we continue through this presentation of what is a good fit, because this is an investment that you're making, and you want it to be the right choice and the right fit for you. So making sure you ask those questions. The one thing I will recommend is that most colleges typically do ask that you register for a campus tour prior to just showing up on campus. And many of us will have a registration system on our website. I recommend going ahead and checking our calendars to see what our availability is. Depending on certain times of the year, we sometimes book up very quickly, so planning ahead is very important to make sure that we have space for you. Sometimes we are able to work with walk-ins, but it can be challenging for us sometimes just to space capacity and things like that. So making sure you're planning ahead, or if you're planning a summer vacation and you're going to be near one of the schools you're interested in, it may be a good idea to make a stop and just take a campus tour. And then I'm going to hand it back over to Nashla, who's going to talk about college checklists.
Absolutely, Julie. So to your point, in terms of what's a good fit, what feels right, and then when is the right time to do what in terms of kind of planning ahead. So if you are wondering about the right time to start planning all these milestones, when you should start exploring from home, when you should visit campuses, when's the best time to schedule those visits, and when you should start applying, then you should consider a college checklist. So we wanted to tell you about the FloridaShines one. We offer a checklist specific to the state of Florida that offers a breakdown of all of the important tasks you should consider starting in the 9th grade. Now today, Julie was also so kind to share their admissions timeline for Florida State University, where they tell you all of the tasks you need to complete, also starting in the 9th grade, to become or apply and become an FSU student. So all of these are available for you to download under the Helpful Tools for Success tab that you see on your screen. So that's a tool that we recommend you use. Now, in addition to the checklist, FloridaShines offers a college and career planner that can help you learn more about all of the other aspects related to college. So not just admissions, but also high school graduation requirements, dual enrollment resources, university admissions information, GPA information, financial aid, Bright Futures eligibility, all of those pieces that you may want to learn about before you start visiting colleges. So once you have that information, the process of making an informed decision becomes a little bit easier and a little bit less overwhelming. And then the last resource I wanted to share from FloridaShines that I think might help with the topic for today is anything related to academic success. So if you are looking at mastering your academic skills, you can give these a try. They're available for you to download as well. And some of the topics include developing your study skills, note-taking skills, test-taking skills, and activities to help you manage your time, which I think also help you become a better student and ultimately become a better applicant for competitive admissions in our Florida University. So, Julie, I'll hand it back to you to kind of get us more into the timeline piece of when it's important to do what milestones.
Sure. So this slide here talks about senior year, but before I start talking a little bit about that, I think it's really important, probably the end of your junior year or summer of junior year, to really start preparing your list of where you actually are interested in applying to. And I also recommend, as silly as this may sound, to not just apply to one college. I think sometimes students do that, and then if you put all your eggs in one basket, sometimes things don't pan out the way that you planned for them to, and then other deadlines have passed. And so it's important to make sure that you prepare yourself. And really what I suggest is in the summer of your junior year is even just make a timeline for yourself. Most of the colleges and universities in the summer, they have all of their new deadlines and the requirements for college applications available. And so you should visit those websites just to see what actually is required. When are the deadlines? And that way you're prepared. And even if you complete everything prior to the deadline, that's something that's always great. Some institutions may not have a deadline. It may be on something called rolling admissions. So you're going to see a variety of different types of admissions processes as you're going through this college search process and starting your applications. But it's important to make sure you find out if there is a deadline or if there's not, what's required of the application. And then that way, when you start your senior year, it's a little less stressful. I think one of the things I see that's common is a lot of times seniors tend to get very stressed out come about October. A lot of colleges have deadlines usually around November 1st or December. And if you wait until the last minute, a lot of times you're not giving yourself enough time to prepare. And so at the end of your junior year, I recommend taking the SAT, ACT for possibly the first time, possibly the second time, and continuing to test throughout the fall your senior year. So making sure the beginning of your senior year in August that you have already registered for additional testing. Typically in August is when you're going to see your college applications will open for that next fall or summer term, depending on where you're applying and which institution you're interested in.
All right, we may have lost Julie for a second. I know she'll probably dial back in, but while she's doing that, I wanted to highlight a few of her areas on the timeline, but also invite our audience to send questions in for her related to admissions. So as we get Julie back on the line, think about any areas that you'd like to ask about, whether it's related to additional things you may do in the summer to enhance your application or opportunities that you may want to pursue during the fall and spring. When might be the best time to apply? I know some of you may be wondering about the common application and whether it's best to go that route versus the traditional individual college or university application. So we will take those questions in as Julie joins us back here in a second. I also want to invite you, as you think about selecting the right college and selecting the right program, to join us next week when we're going to talk about paying for college and what it takes to be eligible for scholarships and financial aid and all of the pieces that are part of that package so that paying for college doesn't have to be difficult or overwhelming. We're going to have an expert from Florida's Office of Student Financial Assistance who's going to walk us through the financial aid process as well. So as you're thinking about some of these questions, then you might consider how to pay for college as well. In addition to that, I also want to invite you to our last session, which will be the following Wednesday, the end of April. Every Wednesday we have a topic of interest. And so after the session on paying for financial aid, we will be hosting a session on how to prepare for careers. So definitely add those to your calendar as you begin to think about that process, and send us in your questions. Julie, I know we have you back on the line.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened or at what point I got cut off.
Okay, yeah, we were sort of discussing the timeline there, and you had mentioned applying to more than one college.
Okay. So what I was saying is I think it's important to go ahead and apply to multiple schools. And the reason for that is, you don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket. You never know what the outcomes may be, and it's good to have different choices, especially, too, because a lot of those institutions may award you different financial aid packages. And if cost is a factor in your decision, then it's great to have options to look at. And so what I was saying is I think it's important the summer of your junior year to go ahead and start and prepare your final list of the schools that you want to apply to, then to also make note by looking up on the websites of each of the colleges, what are their deadlines? It's important to know when those deadlines are, or if there is a deadline. Some institutions are actually on rolling admission, which means that once you've provided your items for your application, you'll hear possibly a week or a few weeks after you've completed your application. It's also important to know what is required to apply. And typically we all list this on our website and have detailed information, so it's good to just be informed so you're prepared. And not rushing once the deadline approaches. I think a lot of times I see seniors typically in about October of their senior year will be very stressed out because a lot of college deadlines tend to be around November 1st or sometimes December. So it's important to make sure that really by August of your senior year that you've registered for an additional SAT or ACT to make sure you have another chance to test again and provide those scores. And also, too, that's when college applications actually go ahead and open for that following year. So you can apply as early as August for some institutions. We encourage students to apply before the deadline. Sometimes we see high volume around the deadline, which can sometimes cause issues with some of our systems and can be very stressful for students. Also, too, I wanted to note that I have the FAFSA listed on here. The FAFSA each year is something that students will have to complete for financial aid, and it opens every October, and it's really helpful. The next item I have on this timeline is your admissions notification, and so once you've been admitted to an institution, a lot of times shortly thereafter, we're able to provide you with a financial aid package, which would explain what your total cost is going to be to attend our institution. And so it's important to have your FAFSA in as early as possible. That way we can go ahead and award you a financial aid package once you have been accepted. I think it's also important to, once you have some of your admissions decisions, those typically come out sometimes as early as December, but more so January, February, March, and April. You may have all of yours very quickly or around the same time, but I think it's important to visit the schools that you've been accepted to possibly again. A lot of times many of the institutions will offer something special for accepted students, whether that's a preview or accepted student day, and that visit is a little different than the regular campus visit that you may have previously been on, and so it's helpful sometimes to be able to do that additional visit just to go ahead and just kind of see if it, again, is the right fit for you or not. And so, or it may be your first visit as well, and sometimes we see that too, that sometimes seniors will wait until they've been admitted to visit. But it's good, I think, sometimes to be able to do both of those visits. And then typically in your senior year, you're going to have until May 1st to make your final college choice. That's typically the national deadline for students to indicate where they're going, and in some cases you may have to pay a deposit by that date. Depending on the institution you're applying to, some of your deadlines that you apply for, you may apply early action, which may be binding, which means that if you're admitted, then you would have to enroll at that institution. And so it's important to look at all of those things when you're actually putting together your list of the colleges you're going to apply to make sure you know kind of each of the steps you need to take your senior year. The next thing I'm going to transition to are just kind of today's takeaways, and then I think we'll go ahead and take some questions. And so I think overall it's really important to start researching colleges to see what's out there, what is going to be a good fit for you as an individual, and kind of what your long-term goals are. To plan ahead throughout your college search and not wait until your senior year to go ahead and actually start the process. go ahead and make those college visits, and then your senior year after you've been accepted to make your final choice of which institution you're planning to attend.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Julie. Such a wealth of resources, never too early to start, and it's so important to plan ahead because it's so much easier if you have a plan. So I know our audience feels much more prepared to kind of face this process starting as early as possible. So, Julie, earlier we asked our audience to share or send in their questions. So I'm going to open up the floor for our audience to go ahead and keep sending in any questions they have. But, Julie, if we can maybe chat through some of these. Our first question is related to summer opportunities and how a student may find ways to get internships and maybe how those help in the admissions application for any competitive admissions university.
Sure. So I think one thing you're going to see a lot as you start talking with different colleges across the country in the state of Florida is that many schools are taking a more holistic approach on their admissions review. So it's not strictly what is your high school GPA and what are your test scores. There's a lot more that's actually involved with that as far as what type of activities are you involved in, what types of awards may you have won, or where do you volunteer, how do you spend your time outside of the classroom as well as inside the classroom. And also, too, I think it's important to note that we like to see students who are well balanced. I think one of the common trends that I'm seeing in high schools is where students are trying to do everything that's absolutely possible and exhausting themselves. And actually, for me, as someone who's worked in admissions for a very long time, that's actually a concern. And the reason for that is, we want to see a student who knows what their strengths are and also knows how to manage their time. Because when you enroll at a college, you're going to be on your own, and you're going to have to make some of those hard choices between extracurricular activities as well as making sure that you're doing well academically. And, here at Florida State, we take that very seriously, and we want to see our students perform well in high school, but also perform well while they're here as students. And so it's important to, and if you don't have to get yourself involved with everything, but it's important to have a well balance and know that both things are important and to not neglect one or the other.
Thank you, Julie. The next question is related to kind of staying in the topic of college applications. Can you talk a little bit about SAT and ACT and whether or not there is a preference, what they each entail, and then how many times it's recommended that a student take it so that they improve their score if they're wishing to do that?
Sure. That's a great question. And so I think one of the most common conceptions is that most institutions require you to take both the SAT and the ACT, and that is actually not true. And I will be honest, most of us don't have a preference of one or the other. We look at them both similarly, and we find that students typically perform better on one than the other, and it really varies student to student. And so I think my advice is for students to take both once, figure out which exam they prefer or feel they perform better in, and stick with that test and continue to test. I don't know if there's a right answer for the number of times you should test. I mean, I see students who will test, 3 times, 5 times, 7 times. Many institutions, when they're reviewing your application, will actually do something called super scoring. And so what that means is we take the highest section of your subject exams, and we actually average them out even though you've taken the test at different times, which gives you a higher score overall. And so I think it's important to find out when you're doing your college research which institutions do super score both the SAT and ACT. I know at Florida State we do super score both, but I know that at some institutions they do not super score the ACT, but they will for the SAT. So that's important to make a note of. I think there's a lot of additional resources out there that offer test prep as far as I know Khan Academy pairs with the College Board for SAT, where you can take your SAT and then send your results to Khan Academy, and then Khan Academy will actually develop a custom study guide for you based on your weak areas for your SAT. And so that's a free resource. I highly recommend using that. I know ACT has free tests on their website as well, where you can take practice exams and kind of get a feel for those. Really, the difference between the two exams is the ACT offers a variety of sections, which include kind of social science and natural science, where the SAT does not have any science that's involved. And so if you are stronger in the STEM area, the ACT may actually be a better fit for you. But like I said, I do recommend that students take both and then go ahead and stick with the exam that they feel is the most comfortable for them to continue taking.
So, Julie, definitely. So practice and asking questions so that you feel confident once you make that selection about those few universities that you've connected with. I was going to ask, Julie, as a follow-up, there's a question about the essay portion. So is it better to take the added essay portion for the SAT typically, or do you have a recommendation there?
So my recommendation is, again, to go and research the schools you plan to apply to. Many institutions no longer require the essay section. I believe there is an extra fee to take it. Sometimes institutions may only require that you've taken it once, but make sure to find out if it's required. If it's not something that, at least at Florida State, it's not required here, so we do not use that in our review, even if it is part of your score. So again, it varies institution to institution of what their policies are and how they review applications. So it's important, again, like I said, to do your research to find out what's actually required.
Absolutely. And typically, Julie, that would be the admissions office at the university or college, correct?
Correct. Yes, and a lot of times, at least on our website, and I know most colleges' websites, under the admissions section, they usually outline the process for freshmen when you're applying, what's required as far as test scores, what they require, or if they super score, those types of things. And so a lot of knowledge is available on our admissions websites, or also give us a call. We're happy to talk with you if you want to call our office or send us an email if you have questions about what our requirements are or if you cannot find them on our website.
Absolutely. So, Julie, when it comes to acceptance and timing, so what happens if a student wants to apply a year after their high school graduation year? Does that make a difference? And then if they apply to a university and they're accepted for a specific term, can they defer their acceptance for a later term or a later semester or even a later year?
Okay. This is a complicated question. So let's do this in two parts. So the first one was, okay, can you apply after you've already graduated from high school? And the answer is yes, but that's a little tricky. So the state of Florida, typically, if you don't enroll at another institution, you don't take any college credit after high school, you're still considered a freshman. You would go ahead and complete a freshman application. If you do take college credit, or one of the things that many students are doing now after high school is taking something called a gap year, where you will attend an international institution. Sometimes you're awarded college credit for that. It's important to ask those questions, because if you are earning college credit in, say it's also an internship or whatever it is that you decide to do, then you may actually have to apply as a transfer student, and that process may be different. So if you are looking into one of those options, I think it's important to contact that office and just kind of ask what the process would be depending on the situation. But generally speaking, if you just want to work for a year or take a year to kind of decide what it is that you want to do, we don't look at that negatively at all. And we would just review your application as if you were a freshman. We would just have your final high school grades, test scores, etc., available to us. Now, the second part of that question was if a student is admitted for a specific term and wants to change their term or possibly defer their term. That process is going to vary institution to institution. Sometimes we have students who will change their terms for a number of reasons. A lot of times you can just call the office and ask what their process is for that. Sometimes it's easier said than done, depending on what your request actually is. I know at least at Florida State, if you've been admitted and you say you wanted to defer your admission for a year, that is not something that we actually do. But we do allow term changes for students, and there is a process specifically for that. But again, that would vary institution to institution, so it's important to communicate with them about what their process may be.
To always ask, absolutely. Julie, you talked about gap year and earning college credit. And so along those lines, if a student goes to a community college to get their AA degree, is it easy to transfer to then a 4-year university to complete their bachelor's degree? And kind of what are your recommendations on where they should start to make sure they're taking the right courses?
Sure. So I think this can be sometimes a complicated question. I know a lot of times, depending on which county you live in and your high school, a lot of times we see certain counties pushing students to earn an AA degree while they are in high school. That, at least at Florida State, sometimes can hurt you. Again, this is something that depends institution to institution. We don't mind students taking dual enrollment credit. We think that's great. You're excelling. That also means that you would be coming in with extra credit. But if a student does not meet our admissions requirements and has an AA while they're in high school, in order to reapply as a transfer student, they would have to attend another institution and earn at least 12 credit hours before reapplying, as well as meet the requirements for their major. And so sometimes, as long as you know what you specifically want to study and you follow our academic guide, which is something I talked about a little bit earlier, which outlines the requirements for all of the majors that we have at Florida State, you would be fine. Again, it's something that if you have a certain goal in mind, it's important to communicate with the colleges that you're looking to apply to make sure that you're following their guidelines for admissions.
So Julie, along the lines of earning credit, how important or relevant are AP courses? And then is there a cap on the amount of AP courses or exams or credits that a student should aim to take? And then I'll ask the second part of that question, which has to do with honor level courses.
Sure. And so I'll take a stab at what you're going to ask as far as the honors level goes, and if I don't answer it, then you can ask me when I finish this question. But typically when we're reviewing applications, at least at Florida State and most institutions, they actually will recalculate your high school GPA. So it'll be what we calculate is a little bit different than what's just listed on your high school transcript. At Florida State, we do a core academic GPA that includes your English, your math, natural science, social science, and world language classes only. And so for honors classes, we actually give half a point of extra weight towards your GPA for every honors course that you've taken. And then we will give a full weight of extra point for any AP, IB, ACE, IB, or dual enrollment class that you've taken throughout high school as well. And so our GPAs are calculated on a 5-point scale, and again, we do calculate every student's GPA when they apply. And so we do not have necessarily, we don't have a minimum number of honors courses or AP classes that we want to see on an application. I think, again, I'm going to reference, we want to see students excelling in areas where they have strengths. The one thing that we don't like to see is if a student is enrolled in a curriculum that they're not ready for. And so if you're earning, all C's in your AP classes, that may just not be the right level for you. And so we really would recommend or would rather see you have A's and B's in honors level courses. And also too, knowing what your strengths are. If math is not your strength, then maybe AP calculus is not the best decision for you to take your junior or senior year. And so those are some of the factors that can actually impact your admission when you're applying to an institution, and those are some of the things that we actually look at. As far as credit goes coming into an institution, I know at Florida State, we only allow students to bring in 45 hours of credit for AP, IB, and ACE credit. On our admissions website, we actually have a guide for each of those that explains the exam result you would need to receive for that AP, ACE, or IB class. and then the credit that you would receive when you come to Florida State. Sometimes you may earn 1 college credit, sometimes you may actually earn 2, depending on the subject as well as the score you receive. And so a lot of us, again, have those resources available on our website, and those are great guides to kind of see how much credit you may earn.
Thank you, Julie. Yes, you got it. It was related to how honor level classes are viewed and processed through the application process. So thank you for answering that. Going back to the admissions process, Julie, do most schools, or are you aware of schools requiring one-on-one interviews as part of the admissions process? And are those typically done on campus, and how does that work?
And so I think sometimes yes. And so, for example, I know at Florida State, if you're applying for one of our performing arts programs, we actually require an in-person audition. And so, again, that's going to depend on the program of interest that you have and each institution's requirements. And so I think it's important to make sure, especially if you are interested in the fine arts, to find out, is there a portfolio or an audition required? And I always encourage students in their junior year to reach out to even those departments just to find out what it is that they're actually looking for in those auditions, because then that gives you almost a full year to kind of prepare for what it is that you have to do when you're applying. And so as far as regular admission at Florida State, we do not require interviews. For admissions processes, I'm not sure if any of the institutions in the state of Florida actually require that or not. I guess that would really be more of an institutional based process. I know many of us like to see you or meet with you, so if you do want to come to campus, we'd be happy to set up meetings with you if you do want to meet with us one-on-one.
That's a great point, Julie. Even almost like a mutual interview where the student can learn more about the campus and the college and the university and maybe even the faculty, and then the university can learn more about the student. So that's a great tip. Julie, we have one more question that you may have some tips on, and if you don't mind, I'll jump in with a resource as well. But for students who are conflicted about majors and programs to pursue, is there a questionnaire or something similar that can help them identify interests and strengths? So I'll quickly mention that we offer in Florida a program called FloridaShines that helps you, starts with assessments and helps you identify your interests, your abilities, and translate them into programs that are relevant to you, and then potential careers, specifically information about careers in Florida as well. So we do have a session dedicated to FloridaShines on Wednesday, April 25th. And so if you're interested in signing up and learning more about that tool, you can sign up at FloridaShines.org. But Julie, I don't know if you have any other recommendations for undecided students?
Sure. So I think there's a lot of different routes you can take. I think one of them is going to be referencing at least the academic guide, which I talked about, that Florida State has, because I think when you actually are able to look at the course curriculum and the employment opportunities with certain jobs, sometimes that's really helpful for students. And, sometimes there are students who just absolutely have no idea what they're good at, and that's okay too. We see that even students who have been accepted and will enroll at Florida State as well. I know College Board, I believe, has some resources for students when they create a login where they can take some assessments to kind of see what would be a good fit for them as far as major goes. But I do want to share that many colleges in Florida, Florida State in particular, has a major called exploratory. And we actually work with students. We like to reference this as kind of a selecting your major boot camp is what happens when you sign up for that major, where you actually meet with our departments and you take a lot of those assessments your freshman year, and you work with our advising first office to actually help you determine a major. At Florida State, we offer over 150 different programs of study, and so that can be a little overwhelming, but we can help you kind of along the way. So I just wanted to mention that as I don't want students to feel stressed out that, the major that you list on your application always has to be the major that you enroll in at that institution, unless it is a specific degree program, kind of like the fine arts that we talked about, or something that requires an audition. Sometimes you can't change your major if you're looking to kind of go down some of those paths, but generally speaking, a lot of times you are able to make some changes to your major, and we understand that you aren't going to know everything by the time you graduate from high school, and we don't intend that you will have that all figured out, and that it will change even when you enroll at the institution of your choice. And a lot of times that's okay. A lot of us are able to work with you and help you narrow down what is the right fit for you.
Julie, absolutely. Always good to ask and always good to get informed and know that things can change, like you said, and that there are resources to help students, particularly here in Florida, to help them statewide, or the institutions have so many resources. So, Julie, that was the end of our questions. I want to thank you so much for sharing all that information today and answering our audience's questions. We appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. We know it's a busy time for you and for your team, so thank you for being with us today. I also wanted to thank our audience for joining us to learn more about choosing the right college or university and being prepared. We're excited that you now have the tools to help you get ready. So now once you've narrowed down those choices, it's important to learn about how to pay for college. So I'd like to invite you to join us next Wednesday for our next session of College Success Series. Paying for college doesn't have to be an obstacle. It doesn't have to be difficult. So next week, you will learn about the financial aid process, getting grants, awards, and scholarships that will help you pay for college and make that process a lot easier. So again, that's next Wednesday, April 18th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And to sign up, you can go to FloridaShines.org. And as a reminder, we do have the recording from this session, and it will be available along with all the materials shared today on our website at www.floridashines.org. So thank you, Julie, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.